And so everybody I work with was very close to Frank. And there's not a day that goes.
Mike Wolfe was once one of the most recognizable faces on American television. As the star of American Pickers, he traveled across the United States with his longtime friend and co-host, Frank Fritz, searching through barns, garages, and dusty attics for hidden treasures. The show was a major success, attracting millions of viewers each season and turning Wolfe and Fritz into household names. However, what began as a fun and exciting partnership slowly turned sour behind the scenes. Rumors of tension between the two began to surface after Frank took a leave of absence due to health problems, specifically a stroke that required a long recovery period. Fans noticed Frank had not returned to the show and began to wonder if something more serious was going on. Things took a dark turn when Frank was suddenly reported dead, supposedly from complications related to his stroke. While fans mourned his loss, few could have imagined the investigation that would follow. Authorities soon began to question whether Frank's death was really natural. What they discovered over the next few weeks would shock the entertainment world and leave viewers stunned. Frank Fritz may have been murdered, and the man responsible was none other than his former friend and co-star Mike Wolfe. At first, the news of Frank's death seemed like another sad moment in a long list of celebrity tragedies. Medical reports suggested he had passed away from complications related to the stroke he suffered months earlier. But something about the case didn't sit right with the medical examiner. When the toxicology results came back, they showed dangerously high levels of prescription drugs in Frank's system, much more than what his doctor had prescribed. These findings led authorities in Iowa to quietly open an investigation. Who had access to Frank in the hours leading up to his death? How? Did these drugs enter his body? The investigation gained momentum when a crew member from American Pickers came forward with crucial information. Mike Wolfe had visited Frank's home on the night of his death. Security footage from the neighborhood confirmed that Wolfe's car had been spotted near the house just 3 hours before emergency services were called. Even more shocking, Wolfe himself made the 911 call, claiming he had found Frank unconscious and unresponsive. At first, his story seemed believable. But as detectives dug deeper, they uncovered Wolfe's fingerprints on several medication bottles at the scene, bottles that contained drugs not prescribed to Frank. Suspicious text messages between the two also surfaced, including one where Wolfe told Frank he needed to back off and know his place. It became clear that the investigation was pointing toward something more serious than accidental overdose. The case against Mike Wolfe was building, and it wasn't looking good for him. As the investigation moved forward, detectives searched Mike Wolfe's home and office. What they found changed the case completely. Inside a locked safe in Wolfe's residence, police discovered several unlabeled prescription bottles. Laboratory tests confirmed that the drugs inside matched those found in Frank Fritz's system. But the most chilling piece of evidence came from a personal journal found inside Wolfe's travel bag. The journal contained years of handwritten entries, many of which expressed frustration, jealousy, and anger toward Frank. One entry, dated just weeks before Frank's death, read, "Frank thinks he can take the spotlight again. Without me, there is no show. He's a problem. And problems need solving." These words painted a picture of a man obsessed with control and fame. Investigators also looked into Wolfe's internet search history. They found disturbing searches like, "Can medication interactions cause stroke?" and "How to hide poisoning in people with existing health conditions." Prosecutors argued that Wolfe used Frank's previous health issues to cover up what he was planning. The combination of physical evidence, like the drugs and fingerprints, and emotional evidence, like the journal and online searches, gave investigators enough to arrest Wolfe and charge him with first-degree murder. News of his arrest shocked fans, who had long admired the duo's chemistry on screen. But as the pieces came together, it became clear that the relationship between Mike and Frank had become dangerously toxic behind closed doors. Mike Wolfe's murder trial began 6 months later and lasted nearly 6 weeks. The courtroom was packed, with journalists, fans, and even former crew members from the show. Wolfe appeared calm as the prosecution laid out its case. They presented evidence in a careful, methodical manner, showing the jury the drug reports, text messages, video footage, and Wolfe's personal journal. Witness after witness described the breakdown in the relationship between the two men. One production assistant testified that Wolfe became increasingly hostile after Frank's stroke, often saying things like, "He can't keep up anymore. He's dragging us down." Other crew members described Wolfe as controlling and obsessed with being the face of the show. Danielle Colby, a longtime co-star and friend to both men, gave some of the most emotional testimony. Fighting back tears, she recalled how Wolfe became aggressive when she suggested he try to make peace with Frank. She also said she once found a notepad in Wolfe's office listing Frank's medication schedule. Although the defense team tried to argue that Wolfe had simply been concerned for Frank's health and was misunderstood, the jury wasn't convinced. They also brought in medical experts, including Frank's personal physician, who confirmed that none of the medication found in his system had been prescribed. It became clear to everyone watching that Wolfe's actions were not those of a concerned friend, but of someone carefully planning a crime. The most dramatic moment in the Yao courtroom came during Wolfe's cross-examination. Until then, he had remained quiet and calm. But when the prosecutor pressed him about the journal and asked if he had ever given Frank the drugs found in his system, Wolfe finally snapped. "You have no idea what it's like to build something from nothing," he shouted, "and then watch someone else try to take it all away." His outburst stunned the courtroom, and many believed it confirmed everything the prosecution had said about his state of mind. The jury took only 4 hours to reach a verdict, guilty of first-degree murder. The judge sentenced Wolfe to life in prison without the possibility of parole. As he was led away in handcuffs, he kept his head down and said nothing. For fans of American Pickers, it was a heartbreaking and surreal moment. The show that had once been about friendship, discovery, and American nostalgia had ended in tragedy. What made it worse was knowing that two people who had once called each other brother had ended up on opposite sides of a murder trial. One was gone forever. The other would spend the rest of his life behind bars. It was a story that shocked the world and left fans wondering how such a deep friendship could turn so deadly. The case may be over, but the story of Mike Wolfe and Frank Fritz continues to raise questions. How could things fall apart so badly between two men who seemed so close on TV? Were there signs that fans missed? Did the pressures of fame, money, and television push Wolfe over the edge? These questions may never be fully answered. What we do know is that fame can sometimes hide dark truths. On camera, Mike and Frank were partners, brothers, and friends. But behind the scenes, jealousy and resentment were growing. It's a reminder that what we see on TV isn't always the full story. In the months since the trial, American Pickers has been quietly canceled, and the History Channel has removed most episodes featuring the two men. Danielle Colby has since spoken publicly, encouraging fans to remember Frank for the kind, passionate collector he was, not for how his story ended. She has also started a small foundation in Frank's name, aimed at helping people recovering from strokes and raising awareness about mental health in the entertainment industry. In the end, the story of Mike Wolfe and Frank Fritz is not just about a crime. It's about the dangers of unchecked ambition, the fragility of friendships under pressure, and the painful cost of betrayal. Fans may never fully recover from the shock of what happened, but they will never forget the journey they watched unfold on screen, and the tragic way it ended. The courtroom was filled with silence as the jury returned to their seats. After weeks of emotional testimony, tense cross-examinations, and shocking evidence, the verdict was finally ready. It had taken the jury only 4 hours to reach a decision, a sign, many believed, that the evidence was too strong to ignore. When the judge read out guilty, gasps filled the room. Mike Wolfe, the well-known star of the popular TV show American Pickers, had just been convicted of the murder of his former co-host and longtime friend, Frank Fritz. The judge wasted no time, sentencing Wolfe to life in prison without any chance of parole. But what happened next left everyone in shock. Wolfe, who had remained calm throughout the trial, suddenly lost control. He jumped to his feet, yelling at the top of his lungs, "You don't understand! He was going to ruin everything!" What started as a loud outburst quickly turned violent. Wolfe lunged across the defense table, knocking over water pitchers and legal pads. He charged toward Fritz's family, screaming and crying as court officers rushed to stop him. The courtroom turned into chaos as people began shouting and trying to get away from the scene. Wolfe was restrained briefly, but broke free again and grabbed an antique walking stick from the evidence table. He swung it wildly, hitting a bailiff, before being tackled to the ground. Even as he was dragged away, he continued screaming about betrayal, loss, and his legacy. What was once a simple courtroom sentencing had turned into a scene of pure destruction, and it would be remembered forever. As Wolfe was dragged out, his eyes locked with Danielle Colby, his longtime co-star. Through tears, he shouted, "Tell them the truth. Tell them what Frank was really like." Danielle turned away, clearly heartbroken. Many others in the courtroom were sobbing too, including former American Pickers crew members. It was clear that this wasn't just a criminal case. It was the complete collapse of a television family that millions of fans had grown to love. Over the years, American Pickers had become one of the most watched shows on the History Channel. People admired the friendly banter between Mike and Frank as they traveled across America searching for hidden treasures. But behind the scenes, something very different had been going on. Testimonies revealed that the relationship between Wolfe and Fritz had slowly turned bitter. According to court documents and former staff members, Wolfe began manipulating those around him to turn against Frank. Some witnesses said Wolfe would talk behind Fritz's back, spreading rumors and making crew members choose sides. Others claimed Wolfe had become obsessed with control and couldn't handle the idea of Frank starting his own show. The betrayal ran deep. As more information came out, people realized this wasn't just a fight between two co-workers. It was a long brewing battle between two people who had once considered each other family. Prosecutors built a strong case against Wolfe, using financial records, emails, and testimony from former colleagues. They revealed that months before Frank's death, Wolfe had quietly made major changes to his businesses. He had created shell companies, fake businesses, and transferred valuable antiques into them without Frank knowing. These antiques were worth more than $2 million. Wolfe had also taken out a $5 million life insurance policy on Frank, naming his company as the sole beneficiary. According to experts, this policy would only pay out if Frank died or became seriously ill. This raised serious questions about Wolfe's intentions. Why would he do all this in secret? Why would he prepare for Frank's death while still acting friendly in public? The prosecution argued that Wolfe wanted full control of the brand they had built together, and that he couldn't stand the idea of Frank coming back and taking away his spotlight. They also presented text messages between Wolfe and a close business associate in which he said, "I can't let him come back, he'll ruin everything I've built." The jury was shown emails where Wolfe discussed ways to acquire Frank's intellectual property, things like his ideas, his image, and his name, without Frank's knowledge. This level of planning shocked many people. It was no longer about two friends falling out. It was about one man trying to erase the other for control, money, and power. The most dramatic part of the trial came when mental health experts took the stand. Dr. Robert Keller, a well-known forensic psychologist, explained that Wolfe showed signs of narcissistic personality disorder. He described how people with this condition often appear charming in public, but can be manipulative, resentful, and even dangerous when their egos are threatened. Dr. Keller said Wolfe likely saw Frank's departure from the show as a deep wound, a narcissistic injury that never healed. Over time, that resentment turned into obsession. He pointed to Wolfe's actions after Frank's death, especially the way he went on social media to express his grief. Within days, Wolfe was posting tearful tributes to Frank, telling fans that he had died due to complications from a stroke. He even launched a limited edition merchandise campaign in Frank's memory. Fans, still in shock over Frank's passing, supported the effort. More than $1 million was raised. But according to investigators, most of that money went into accounts only Wolfe could access. Prosecutor Sarah Donovan summed it up best during her closing argument. This was not just murder. It was a performance. A cold, calculated act of deception meant to manipulate millions of people into mourning, alongside the man who killed his partner. That statement stunned the courtroom, and later, the world. The fallout from the trial has been massive. The History Channel immediately pulled all episodes of American Pickers featuring Wolfe. In a public statement, they expressed shock and extended their condolences to the Frits family. Sponsors quickly followed, ending their contracts and distancing themselves from the show. Some former fans posted online, saying they felt betrayed, heartbroken, and angry. "I watched every episode," one viewer wrote on social media. Mike always seemed so genuine. "I can't believe it was all fake." Frank's family has now filed legal action to take control of his antique collection and his part of the American Pickers brand. They also plan to sue the network for ignoring what they say were clear signs of Wolfe's growing instability. As for the rest of the cast and crew, many have remained silent. Danielle Colby, who testified during the trial, announced that she is taking a leave from television. In a brief statement, she said, "This has been the hardest chapter of my life. I need time to grieve, to heal, and to remember Frank for who he really was." Others who worked on the show have avoided the public spotlight, too emotionally shaken to speak. The people who once brought America stories about old treasures and forgotten history are now living a nightmare that no one ever expected. In the E. And the story of Mike Wolfe and Frank Fritz is more than just a legal drama. It's a tragic fall from grace. These two men built something special. Together, they turned American Pickers into one of the most popular reality shows in the world. Viewers watched them for years, laughing at their jokes, learning about antiques, and admiring their friendship. But behind that success was a storm that had been brewing for a long time. Wolfe's jealousy, desire for control, and fear of being replaced led to a series of choices that destroyed everything. His courtroom outburst, the screaming, the violence, the final cries of "It was my show," was the last chapter in a story of betrayal and obsession. Even the judge, in his final comments, seemed heartbroken by what had unfolded. "Mr. Wolfe," he said, "you presented yourself as a champion of American history, a lover of the past. But now, you are part of a tragedy that will never be forgotten." For fans, the hardest part is accepting that the man they once welcomed into their homes every week was not who he seemed. It's a painful reminder that sometimes the people we trust the most can have the darkest secrets, and in this case, those secrets ended in violence, loss, and a legacy forever changed.